Her beautiful eyes were bright. This day is the burden of tears, the darkness of the night, our dreams of hope and fears. Edgar Allan Poe wrote this poem in 1851. Isn't it beautiful? Yeah, right. Well, the problem is that he didn't write it in 1851, because in 1851 he was dead for 2 years already. This poem, actually, along with some others that I will show you today, was generated by an artificial neural network that was trained to resemble styles of different poets. We trained it together with my co-author, Alexei Tikhonov. My name is Yamshchikov, and I'm a postdoc in Max Planck Institute for Mathematics and the Sciences, and we have this project with Alexei that's called Created Labs, where we study different applications of artificial intelligence to art and try to find some intersections, because surprisingly there are much more of them than one would ever think. So today I'll tell you about how we write poems with machines, basically, and what are the questions that arise on the way, because I think that the questions that come up when you work with this kind of methods and try to write poems with machines are actually very entertaining. But the first question I assume you have is that why, right? Because why algorithms would write poems? Algorithms rarely get depressed. Usually that we know of, they don't have this crisis of identity or misunderstanding that they would like to express. As far as we know, algorithms do not fall in love. So there's no solid motivation for this thing, right? And yeah, you're right. There's none. But I'll try to give you several possible answers of why would we like to study the applications of algorithms to poetry generation. And the first answer is so simple that I'm sure you didn't think about it. It's fun, you know? It's fun to read poems that nobody wrote and trick people like I tricked you a minute ago. But of course, this is too selfish to be the only explanation. There is actually a more reasonable and more practical one. So, have you ever tried to talk to your phone? Come on, don't be shy. We all don't have life. It's fine. Okay, apparently I'm the only person who tried. You are very sociable here in Greece. But somehow, if you try to talk to your phone, you'll notice that even the most top-notch phones are basically behaving like a goldfish. They forget stuff you mentioned an hour ago. You know, you cannot, I guess what I'm saying is that you cannot have a meaningful relationship with your phone. This is what I say. And this is due to a nature of language, because our language turns out to be very interesting in terms of how we use memory as we talk. If I now refer you back to Edgar Allan Poe, it will make sense for you. You were like, yeah, sure, he started his talk with Edgar Allan Poe. However, if I talk to my phone and now start talking about Edgar Allan Poe, the phone will be completely out of sight. It will be like, what? Why? So we only manage to generate responses in a very well-defined context of communication. Because communication by language is very easy for us, but it's very hard for the machines. And this is a tricky question, because machines can multiply numbers really fast and do a lot of amazing things, but communication is not their thing. So studying these kind of applications and trying to generate poems is actually demanding the knowledge and understanding of our language that could potentially improve this experience for us. Another reason is that your phone is flat. It doesn't have personality, whereas people use different words to say different things. People have style. But if you go to a linguist and ask, hey, sir, how do you define style of literature? You'll hear a lot. Some of the things will be interesting, but then you'll say, okay, I'm a mathematician. Can you define some things, like equation or whatever? How does it work? It doesn't. So we thought, okay, can we try and get style out of texts? We thought, okay, we'll have an artificial neural network. We will show it the texts basically, algorithms are trained in a very similar way in which we train children. We show them texts, and then we ask them to reproduce them, and there are certain functions that we would like to optimize on the way, so it gets better and better, hopefully, at some point. Yes, so we thought, can we capture the style without any theoretical notions, just showing a lot of poems? And apparently we can. This is another example. In this jungle I stand up. I want to be free. Turn the beat up to the top, because this is what I want to be. Can you make a guess of what's the poet? Any ideas? No, yeah, it's machine, but like what was it aiming for? Come on. Bob Marley, right. Very good. The funny thing, though, is that if you mix the real lines with generated lines and start to show it to people and ask them to have multiple choice tests, this particular verse, people identify with Bob Marley more often than they identify Bob Marley with Bob Marley. I think that's fun. Yes, so it turns out that you can actually end-to-end learn the style of a poem, and then the poetry is a very interesting genre of natural language. Every line is relatively short. So do you remember I was telling that in our actual communications we tend to have long references, like I'm making now. But with poems you can do it line by line, and then you can rhyme it, and then you can hope that just because there is some feeling or emotion between the lines, human brain will connect it. Believe me, we are incredibly well in connecting the dots. So, on the year when Kurt Cobain would have been 50, we decided to make a rock album with the songs where lyrics were generated by AI, and the music was written by us, and the singing was done by New York musician Rob Carroll. And this is what we got. This is an example.
My life is all I can relate, but they said I would be afraid. Come from my past and interfere, then a planet would be revealed. My cool is full, it's the best fruit. No lie awake in solitude. Life is a game, it is a curse. I'm wishing I could keep it worse.
I'm sorry for the hardcore Nirvana fans. No offense meant. We're cool. Please don't throw anything. Yeah. But as I was working on that, so to generate these lyrics, you get the output of the neural network where you say, give me some Kurt Cobain, basically. And you have a lot of lines, and you go through them because, you know, poets are not perfect. Sometimes they make mistakes. Sometimes the mistakes are grammatical. Sometimes the line doesn't make sense. So you have to filter it and pick the lines that fit better and actually are human language. Unfortunately, the systems are still faulty. But as I was going through the lines, I made several very interesting, notions. I found several interesting things that I would like to share with you. So this is one example. This is another Bob Marley for you. Don't you know you ain't no fool? You're gonna make some fun. But she's fighting every rule. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone. Well, Bill Withers wrote Ain't No Sunshine When She's Gone. But, you know, good artists create, great artists steal, you know. So you definitely see that the neural network has this dynamic of a great artist. It can take another line and put it somewhere where it belongs. Frankly, it sounds amazing in this verse. So that was a surprise, because at first we were filtering the exact copies, but then we were not, and this is what occurred. And I was like, okay, it makes sense. Bob Marley, Bill Withers, there's a certain relationship. Another example that I loved is from Neurona. So this is one of the songs that we had on the mini album. There were actually 4 in total. And one verse ran like this. If you find a tree, you can leave a mark, a God who's always welcome to Iraq. Now, okay, first of all, Kurt Cobain died before Iraqi campaign. So there's no chance that algorithm could infer that Kurt Cobain would write something about Iraq, right? It's a very rare word in English language. People don't use it too much. But if you think about it, there are actually a lot of other grunge bands that were finding inspiration in Kurt's lyrics. And they were also in a training data set when we were training the network. So it makes a lot of sense that it samples this word, despite the fact that it's relatively rare, because I personally have a feeling that Kurt wouldn't be silent about that. He would write that. Which is also sort of an eye-opening thing for me, because when we started that, we had this paradigm of statistical learning. Statistical learning is this aspect of machine learning, this notion that we learn from experience. We show to the system something that happened, we do it iteratively, and then time after time it gets better and better, making small steps at a time, right? There is a joke, what's the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning? And the answer is, look at what it's written. If it's written in PowerPoint, it's AI, but if it's written in Python, it's machine learning. So, we were very practical people. We didn't expect to get some new insights out of the historical data. Actually, when we released the album, one of the reviews was, yeah, it's very nice, but it's very secondary. It's very derivative. And we're like, yeah, of course it is. It's statistical learning. But then when we were filtering that, we found out that sometimes, even through this very rigorous procedure, you can get something that feels a lot like creativity. And this is actually tricky. Because we think in language, right? Or maybe we don't, but we have a notion of sometimes that we think in language. And then we have this chicken and egg problem. Do we have language because we think? Or do we think because we have language? And this is not very clear, but with the machines, we currently have a problem of creating language or teaching them language. So there is a very strong intuition that maybe these things are connected deeper than we thought of. Another example that I wanted to give is this line. So when I was writing a paper, I found examples that were definitely faulty, and I would like to showcase them as examples of where the system fails generating something that makes a good poetry line. And I found this example. At night, I lay waiting for a. And I'm like, oh no, this is not how poetry works in English, right? I don't know how is it in Greece. Greek poetry has longer history. Maybe in Greece you can end a poem line with a, but in English you can't. And then I went to the conference to present the result, and one of the participants came over to me and said, wait a minute, but this is a perfect one-liner. At night I lay waiting for a, what? You got this longing, right? You would like to have a word there, but you don't exactly know what it is. And he said, I had this feeling. When you lay at night, you cannot fall asleep, and you wait for something, but you don't know what it is. So this is serendipity, of course. Network doesn't experience that, for sure. But this is a very illustrative example of what's the difference between creativity and serendipity. And it's very intriguing and thought-provoking to me. Because, when Archimedes was shouting Eureka, was it because he was Archimedes and he had all this line of experience beforehand, and then he made just a tiny next step when water fell over the sides of his basin? Or was it because he was genuinely opening something new and making a huge leap? We have this idea that creativity is always a huge leap. But machine learning shows us that maybe it's not always the case. And I think this is a huge mystery and a huge unknown that we really need to look at and study further. And this is why we try to teach algorithms to write poems, for example. Because we would really like to understand better how and why humans write poems, come up with new theories, dance, sing, because this is something that helps us to understand us. Artificial intelligence research was inspired with many analogies and many ideas from neuroscience. Back in the 50s or in the 60s or in the 70s, whenever computer scientists were thinking about some clever biological system, they were like, okay, can we reproduce it? Can we model it with our algorithms? But I feel that we're currently approaching this very interesting and exciting border when studying computer science. could allow us to understand ourselves better. Because I think the bottom line goes like this. Not every intelligence is artificial, but every true intelligence should have the capacity to be artistic. Thank you very much.